Now we're going to discuss today probably the most difficult avodah, the most difficult spiritual practice that we as Jews have to activate, and probably the most difficult spiritual practice that anybody in any religion has to activate. It's a lifelong work. It's something you struggle, or at least let me speak for myself. It's something that I have struggled with and been challenged by throughout my life, year after year after year, to try and get a little bit better and better at it. And as one gets older, one does get better at it if one's working on it. But it's a lifelong task. And when you've mastered it, you've mastered the capacity to live in two worlds at once. To live in a physical world and a spiritual world simultaneously. To be able to do this, you have to be able to master this very difficult avodah. And the avodah that I'm talking about is the synchronization of two opposite ideas. It's a real polarity. On the one hand, bitachon, which we'll define as we go through the shiur tonight, trust in Hashem. Bitachon is different from emunah. Emunah is faith and belief in Hashem. Bitachon is trust in Hashem. And so that's the one pole. And the other pole is hishtadlut. We also have to make the effort. You can't sit back and wait for Hashem to do things. So you've got to trust that Hashem takes care of everything, and on the other hand, you've got to act as though He doesn't. And that polarity is an incredibly difficult paradox to manage, and we'll talk about two schools of thought into what this is and how to manage that polarity, and we'll actually reconcile these two schools of thought. And our discussion tonight starts with the opening of the Parashat. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Shlach lecha anashim v'yaturu et eretz Canaan asher ani noten livnei Yisrael. Send out men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the Bnei Yisrael. Ish echad lematei avotav. One person from each tribe. Tishlechu kol nasivahem. The person you send should be the leader of the tribe, the most honorable person, the most spiritually developed person in the tribe. So these spies who were sent were the cream of Klal Yisrael. But we're not talking about that aspect of it. We're talking about the mitzvah. Shlach lecha anashim. Hashem says, send out people to check the land out. That's just such a contradiction in terms. Hashem has been telling us all the time what a wonderful land I've got for you, and it's flowing with milk and honey, and it's going to be all wonderful. And now He says, and send some spies just to check it out. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it this? Is it that? Are we having second thoughts suddenly? Do we need a sales job? What is this? Rashi says, Shlach lecha. Why does it say lecha? Why doesn't the Torah just say, Hashem says, Shlach, send. Shlach lecha means send for yourself. And there are different views. The one view that Klayokah brings, that Rabbeinu Bechaya brings, is Shlach lecha. This is going to be good for you, Moshe, because they're going to mess up, which means they're going to stay in the desert 40 years longer, which means you've got an extra 40 years to live because you're not going into Israel. And that was even before the story with the rock. It was already decreed before that Moshe was not going to go into Israel. The problem was how that would transpire, how it would happen. And the way it transpires is through the rock. But if it wouldn't have been the rock, it would have been something else. And so, and Hashem says, Shlach lecha, this is not for them. They're going to suffer because of sending these people. It's no good for them, but don't you be upset about it, Moshe, because it actually works well for you. You're going to be a benefit. That's how some of the Mefarshim take that word lecha. But Rashi takes it differently and says, Ledatcha, shlach lecha. You send if you want to. I'm not instructing you. Ani eini mitzaveh lach. This is no mitzvah. I'm not telling you you have to. Im titzeh shlach. The people have come to you, as we see later on in Dvorim. We see that the people came and they crowded around Moshe and they wanted to send spies out to the land. And Moshe thought it was not a bad idea. And Hashem says, okay, if you think it's a good idea and you want to do it, you do it. I'm giving you permission, but I'm not commanding you. That's how Rashi does it. Why not? Because you don't need spies. I'm going to lead you through. I'm going to lead you through the battle. You're going to conquer this land miraculously. What do you need spies for? To figure out how to do it militarily. It's not going to be done militarily. And Rashi expands on that, and Rabbeinu Bechaya expands on the Rashi, and says, Kivein harav lomar, clearly Rashi intended to say, Afal pi sheshlichut hameraglim al pi Hashem u'mitzvato, even though the sending out of the spies is by Hashem's instruction, the fact is Hashem does say, Shlach lecha, He is mitzvah that, so Rabbeinu Bechaya says it is a mitzvah. But lo hayta ha-mitzvah birtsono, That's a new idea, a mitzvah of Hashem that is not b'ritzono, a mitzvah of Hashem that is not one that He really wants. Normally we say a mitzvah is the Ritzon Hashem. That's exactly what a mitzvah is, isn't it? A mitzvah is Ritzon Hashem. So why would this not be Ritzon Hashem? But we see it. That's what it is. It's a strange mitzvah. It is a mitzvah. I'm telling you to do it, but it's not what I want. Ideally, this is not what I want. Hashem is willing to fulfill the democratic choice of Bnei Israel. They want to send Meraglim. Hashem says, send. You want a government that's a bit left, you want a government that's a bit right, whatever you want, Mainzun, I'll give you whatever you want. Tell me what government you want, I'll give you the government you want, I'll give you the government you deserve. That it's not going to make a difference to the way history plays out. You want to send spies? It's fine, send spies. But it's not the Ritzon Hashem, which seems to align with the Ramban. When the Ramban said, I say seems to align because we're going to shift that position later on. But it seems to align with the Ramban, where the Ramban says, this is going with the Ramban in Parashat Bo, at the end of Parashat Bo, Mitzvah Tfilin, he says, She'ein la'adam chelek b'torat Moshe Rabbeinu. A Jewish person has no chelek, no part in Moshe's Torah, ad shena'amin b'chol devareinu u'mikreinu, unless we believe in everything that occurs to us, shekulam nisim, that everything that happens to us is miracle. Everything. Ein bahem teva u'minhago shel olam. There is no nature and natural law and consequence. Yes, it looks like that, and it's set up to look like that, but that in itself is miraculous. Each thing that happens is miraculous. And to understand that everything that happens is nes. Bein berabim, bein beyach. Again, if we have a new government or we go back to the old government, it's all nisim. It's all miracles. Miracles don't always have to turn out well. The splitting of the Red Sea was a miracle for the Egyptians too. It wasn't a good miracle for them, but it was still a miracle. That was still a nes that they beheld. They all died in it. So nes doesn't mean it's good, it just means it's miraculous. And we've got to believe that everything is miraculous. If a person does the mitzvahs, one has to believe that ultimately there will be hatzlacha. Maybe the hatzlacha is not the way we define it, the success is not the way we define it, maybe Hashem has a different definition, but there will be hatzlacha. And if one disobeys Hashem, then there is punishment and consequence for that. Everything is decreed by Hashem. And if you don't believe that, you don't have a part in the Torah. It's not that, you're still a frum Jew, but that one thing I don't believe. Says the Ramban, if you don't believe that, then where is the Yiddishkeit? What do you believe in? That is the foundation, says the Ramban. So this seems to align with it. Rashi says, you don't need spies. Everything's going to be miraculous. Why do you need spies? That seems to be aligned with the Ramban. I've got to believe that everything is miraculous. It seems to be aligned with the Mesilas Yesharim in Perek Kaf Aleph. Technically, theoretically, says the Mesilas Yesharim, Hayadam yachol liyot yoshev uvatel. A person could sit doing nothing. You could lie on the beach all day. The Hagzeira, and what Hashem decided on Rosh Hashanah will be your income. Haytamit kayemet. Hashem would take care of it. We say that it's decided in Rosh Hashanah time how much you're going to earn. So what's all the working for? In lo shekadam haknas l'chol bnei adam. The problem is Hashem imposed a fine, a knas, on humanity, and that was b'zeyat apecha tochal lechem. You have to sweat for a living. It's a knas. It's not the way you earn a living. The way you earn a living is from the hand of Hashem. But there's a condition. I won't open my hand to you unless you've paid your taxes, and the taxes mean you've got to work. So a human being a person has to do something for his parnasa. You can't just sit on the beach and you can't just take it easy. You've got to do something for your parnasa. Because that's a gzeira from Hashem. This is a universal tax from which there is no escape. You can't evade it, you can't avoid it. This is a tax. So when we go to work, we're paying a tax. And it's interesting that it's a tax more than a punishment. He doesn't call it an onesh, a punishment for the sin of Adam Rishon. It's a tax. Because what is our work used for? It's used to build the world. The tax is put to good use. Everybody builds a business or has a job or does whatever they need to do. And in that way they're building that's the issue of our So Hashem, instead of building the world miraculously, said, you guys will do the work. That's the tax. You're enslaved to me and you have a tax to pay. And that's what Hishtadlut is. According to the Mesilat Yesharim, Hishtadlut is a precondition for success, but not the cause of success. So all the clever things and ideas that you have in business, that's not why you have success. That's something you have to do, because without that, you don't get the success. And therefore he says, you've got to make the effort in everything that you do. But you have to know that your effort is not what makes you successful. Hishtadlut is just necessary. It's incumbent upon us. It's compelled. And once you've done your hishtadlut, you've made the effort, you've invested in your work, then you've done your duty. Now there is a kli, there is a vessel that can accept the bracha. So Hashem doesn't give bracha into empty space, into a vacuum. For bracha to exist, there's got to be a vessel that can receive the bracha. And our work, our effort, the businesses we build, the professions we have, that's the vessel, and Hashem brings success into that vessel. But if we don't create the vessel, we can't expect success. That's the understanding. So all the idea of ishtadlut, of putting in the effort, is to create a vessel. So how hard do you have to work? Says the Mesilat Yesharim, not very hard. Just have a little business that Hashem can bless. That's all you need to do. Reb Zundel Salanta is said to have said, Reb Zundel Salanta was a talmid of Reb Chaim Volozhiner and the Rebbe of Rabbi Yisrael Salanta. So he's an important linkage between the Vilna Gaon school, the Vilna Gaon and Reb Chaim Volozhiner, and then Reb Zundel Salanta moves into the Mussar school, into Rabbi Yisrael Salanta and into the talmidim of Rabbi Yisrael Salanta down until the present day. So Reb Zundel is very important. And Reb Zundel said, all you need to do is to have, as the Mesilat Yesharim says, a kli, you need to have a utensil, you need to have a vessel that Hashem can put bracha inside. Without the utensil, there can be no bracha. And Reb Zundel is reputed to have said, so he buys a lottery ticket every week. That way, if there's a kli, if Hashem wants to bring him money, there's a lottery ticket. He's quoted by reliable sources as having said that, but I have a huge difficulty with it. The idea of this tax is not just to buy a lottery ticket. When the Mesilat Yesharim says this is a tax, the idea is that you're investing your effort into Yishuv HaOlam. You're doing something constructive. It's not just a kli, like a lottery ticket, where you're not doing anything for the world. That's not what it means. It means that you build a business which has the capacity to make a difference to the world. That's the kli. I've never met a religious Jew who's won a lottery ticket, because that's not how Jews earn their living. Jews earn their living by making a difference, not by buying a lottery ticket. So what Reb Zundel said is reputed to have said doesn't make sense to me at all. But that's what they say that he said. The idea being, and that's consistent with this school of thought that I've been outlining to you, that earning a living, the hishtadlut, the effort, is just a gesture of knas. You're paying your dues. You're creating a utensil, and you do as little as you can, and the rest of the time you learn and you do avodat Hashem, and you do whatever you can do to develop yourself as a great human being and from a spiritual perspective. But if that is so, then the Ramban on our Parsha is difficult. So if we read the Ramban on Parashat Bo the way that I read it, supporting that view of Rashi, that Hashem didn't want the spies to go, you don't need spies to go. Why not? We're going into battle. Surely we should plan our strategy, and for that we need to know where the fortresses are, and where the minefields are, and where the armies are. Surely we need to know that. No, says Hashem, leave that to me. And all you need to do is you've got to make a gesture. We'll get to the time to fight. You'll get into uniform and you'll go into battle, and I'll take care of the rest. Because you don't have to do very much. I'll take care of it. But then the Ramban on our Parsha says that he disagrees with Rashi. And he believes that although the people did ask for it, and Moshe thought it was a good idea, this mitzvah has nothing to do with their request. This is not a response to public pressure. This is an absolute mitzvah from Hashem. That he says if it was like, as Rashi said, then Hashem would have said, listen to the people, do as the people said. He would have referenced it somewhere. There's no reference at all that the people even said we have to get to Dvarim before we learn that the people actually asked to send the spies in. But at this stage we don't even know that. No mention of it. It says the Ramban, there's no mention of it because it's not connected. It's connected from a time perspective. Sequentially it's connected. Yes, they said let's send spies. Moshe says good idea. Ask Hashem. Hashem says send spies, but not because they've asked for it. Send spies lecha. You do it in any case. V'amar lo stam shlach lecha anashim. He just said as a general mitzvah, I'm instructing you, I'm commanding you to send people. If the Ramban held that school of thought that we've just mentioned, that you don't need to do anything physical, you've just got to create a kli, why would the Ramban say that Hashem said you've got to send spies in? Why do you have to send spies in? Leave it as a miracle. So the Ramban, I believe, does not follow that approach, but follows a different approach, which we see from a posuk in Mishle. Shlomo HaMelech says in Mishle, in end of Perich Chof Aleph, Ein chokhmah ve'ein tvuna ve'ein eitzah leneged Hashem. There's no wisdom and there's no understanding and there's no scheming and planning before Hashem. The plans are all in Hashem's hands. And in the next pasuk, Sus muchan liyom milchama. The horses have to be ready for war. But Hashem atashua, but Hashem is the victorious one. And there you've got the paradox. Shlomo HaMelech already creates the paradox. The army has to be ready for battle. All the horses have to be ready for the invasion. But don't think you're going to win it. Hashem does the winning, not you. Says Rabbeinu Yonah on that. Ki chayavim b'nei adam lihishamer lenafshotehem. People have to do everything within their power to take care of their well-being. You can't leave that to miracles. Ulachin sus chleizayin. You've got to prepare an army. You've got to have your horses and your tanks and your fighters, and everything has to be in place. Your iron dome, you need it all. Hashem yitbarach yoshia ve'yachonet asher yachol. But then you need to know that the results of that are not caused by the iron dome or by the army. The result is Hashem's. And here's this difficult paradox. So you've got to invest all the effort into strategic planning and execution, knowing that it's for naught. It's not going to make a difference. You have to do it. The din is you have to do it. You can't sit back. But it's not going to make a difference. Hashem's already decided the outcome. You've got to play out. You've got to act it out. If you don't act it out, it's not going to happen. Or you won't be part of it's happening. So this is Rabbeinu Yonah is a completely different approach. And interesting is that Rabbeinu Yonah and the Ramban, I think the Ramban was a talmid of Rabbeinu Yonah. They're connected. So it makes sense that the Ramban is, as I've suggested, not aligned with Rashi. And Rabbeinu Bechaya is of the same school of thought. And at the beginning of the Parsha, he quotes this posuk from Mishle, and he says, the idea is that Hanes eino chal ela b'chisaron hateva. Miracles only begin where nature ends. You've got to take things naturally as far as you can, and then miracles happen. Similar to something we discussed last week or the week before. Only after a person has done everything within his power and tried with all his effort, and using natural means, he's done everything to make good preparations. Nevertheless, he's got to know that the results are not the outcomes of all of these efforts, the results are from Hashem. So once again, we see the same idea, except he goes further. The Rabbeinu Bechaya says, not only is it, you don't just make a gesture, you don't just buy a lottery ticket, according to Rabbeinu Bechaya. You do everything you humanly can to be successful. And then you leave it to Hashem. כי כל העניינים האלה הם הכנות לעשות מה שבכוח האדם לעשות בדרך המנהג והטבע. All these things, he brings lots of examples from Tanakh They're all human efforts to do what a human being is able to do using natural methods. And then the miracle affects the outcome of all of these natural things that we've put in place. You've got to put all the pieces in place and then turn it on, and miracle. It works. Hashem makes it happen. And imagine if somebody didn't understand anything about electricity, and he saw people building a house and putting light fittings in and putting a refrigerator and a stove and heating and wiring them all together. And you say, that's all very nice, but who's going to make the fires? And you say, just watch. Turn the switch and everything works. Miracle. That's how it is. All the pieces have to be put in place. And the Ribbono Shel Olam, Kivyochel, so to say, is the electric current. You turn it on, and then it works. So does it work because you put the fridge there, and the refrigerator there, and because you put the heater over there, and because you put the oven over there? Is that why it works? No. It works because of electricity. It works because of Hashem's Koach. And what if you wouldn't have put the refrigerator there, and you wouldn't have put the oven there, and you wouldn't have put the heater there, and you wouldn't have put the lights in the ceiling? Would it work? No, it wouldn't work. You need the partnership. You need both. You've got to put the pieces in place, and you've got to connect to the current. The current is the nisim. The current is the energy of Hashem. We have to put all the pieces in place, and then we've got to leave it to Hashem to turn on the switch and make it happen. He goes on, the mitzvah is for Yisrael to do all the hishtadlut. And that's shlach lecha anashim. You have to send spies, not because they asked for it. You've got to send spies because that's what you do in war. And then the Bnei Yisrael might say, Hashem, but you're fighting for us. Now, I'm turning on the lights. I'm turning on the electricity. You've got to have the pieces in place. And intelligence is part of a battle scheme, about part of the strategy. How can you go into battle without intelligence? It's one of the pieces. So you need to have intelligence. And afterwards hand it over to he who brings about victory, or who is master of victory. Because the Torah will never rely on a nest. You've got to put the pieces in place. And we've got to know that with all of our efforts, the Yeshua is, the victory is Hashem's, it's not. So what Rabbeinu Bechaya is articulating here is, we have to make the efforts, and we have to detach from the outcome. Once we've done the effort, we can no longer control the outcome. There's a point at which you have to detach. You can't detach too early, because then you're not putting the pieces in place. But you can't hold on too long and try and control everything after the pieces are in place. Once the pieces are in place, it works. Reconciling says, Reconciling is a fascinating man who died in the 1970s, I think, or early 1980s. He was the mashgiach in Ponevezh Yeshiva after Rav Dessler, but before that, he was a Godel b'Yisrael already in Eastern Europe. As a young boy, his parents died, I think, very, very young, and as a young boy, mitzvah age, he had to start working for a living. And he went to work, and early on in his career of working, very early on, he went to the mikveh on Friday, to the bathhouse. They didn't have baths in the houses. They used to go to the public bathhouses, to the mikveh. And while he was there having his shower, somebody stole his wages for the week. And he came out, and all the week's wages have gone. So what does one do? So what Reb Chatzkel does, even as a 13-year-old, he says, so what's the point? What's the point of working? If I would have spent that time learning, I would have had what I earned. Now I spent my time working, I haven't got the learning and I haven't got the money. What's the point? And so he dedicated himself from that moment onwards. He went to the Chofetz Chaim, he went to Radin, and he learned in the yeshiva of the Chofetz Chaim. Chofetz Chaim trained him, and then he learned with Reb Nachum Zev, with the son of Reb Simcha Zissel, the Alter from Slabodka, and others, and he became very great in Eastern Europe. He came to Eretz Yisrael, and he was a mashgiach in Petach Tikva in the 1930s, I think, or even earlier. Went back to Eretz Yisrael when Rabbi Yerucham, the mashgiach in Mir Yeshiva, passed away, and he took that job, became the mashgiach in Mir in Eastern Europe. And then the war came along, and with Mir Yeshiva, he went to Shanghai, right across Russia, and he went to Shanghai, And he was saved, and from there he went to the United States, and he had a position in the United States, and then he came back to Israel, and eventually became in his late years, became the great mashgiach of Ponevezh Yeshiva. And he says about the Meraglim, unlike what Rabbi David Lapin said, that some people say that this was for Moshe's benefit, that he got extra 40 years of living, Reconciling brings, not so at all. This would have happened in any case. It would have happened some other. They were going to spend 40 years in the desert. That's how long it was going to take to get them ready to come into Israel, and they were going to spend 40 years in the desert no matter what. Just as Adam was going to eat from the apple, from the Eitz Hadas, no matter what happened. It was going to happen. It was going to happen with the snake and with Chava or some other way, but it was going to happen. Nothing happens as part of the Ramban. Nothing happens that isn't Hashem's decree. What we choose is what our involvement is in it. Are we part of that process, or are we separate? If it's a negative thing that's unfolding, are we the cause of that negative thing, or does it just happen? If it's a positive thing, are we partners in the positivity, or does it just happen? That's our choice. Our choice is how engaged we are in the evolution of the world. But our choice is not to make it all happen. We don't make it happen. We enable it by putting the pieces together. And therefore the Meraglim, that would have happened, if it wasn't the Meraglim of sin, there would have been something else that would have happened, and the Bnei Yisrael would have been in the desert for 40 years. And so he says quite clearly, it's not our effort that causes it. The Ori Yechezkel says, Reb Chatzkel Levenstein, who I met and heard speak, very difficult to hear him and to understand him. I remember once my father took me to hear him speaking, and the Ponevezh Rav Kahaneman was still alive, and I remember so clearly Ponevezh Rav sitting up in the Mizrach, up in front, and my father sitting in the benches with the boys in yeshiva, and me sitting next to him, and the Chatzkel speaking for about an hour. I didn't understand a word. And afterwards, Ponevezh Rav invited us to his home, and we were having some tea with him. And he says to my father, "Did you enjoy the Drosh? Did you enjoy Reb Chatzkel?" And my father says, "Not only didn't I enjoy it, I couldn't tell you what language he was speaking." And the Ponevezh Rav laughed and said, "Well, I'll tell you what he said." So my father said, "How did you know what he said? How could you possibly have heard?" Because he used to mumble and he stuttered. He was a terrible speaker. And in fact, his Rabbeim told him to take elocution lessons, to learn how to speak, and he never did. And the Ponevezh Rav said, I know I also couldn't hear the words, but I know how he thinks. So when he quoted something, I could string the quotes together and figure out what he's probably saying. That says the Ponevezh Rav, that's how he understood it. So yes, I heard Reb Chatzkel speak, I saw Reb Chatzkel, I spoke to Reb Chatzkel, but I never understood anything that he said, but I've learned his for him. And Reb Chatzkel says, this is the hardest avodah. Because normally, the Sefer HaChinuch says, "Acharei ha'ma'asim nimshachot halavavot." The heart and the mind follow the actions. So that's part of the whole principle of mitzvahs. You do chesed, you do good things, and you start to feel good things. That's part of how it works. It's not that you have a feeling and then you express the feeling. You do the right thing and you develop a taste for the right thing. You do good and you start becoming good. You do kindness and you become kind. The thoughts and the minds follow the deeds and the actions. And says Reb Chatzkel Levenstein, in this case that doesn't work. Because the actions are, you've got to act as if God is not in control. And your thoughts have to be, but God is in control. So your actions are in complete contradiction to the thoughts you're meant to have while you're acting. It's the only case in the Torah. There isn't another example of it in life, but it's something that affects us 24 hours a day. That while you're working, while you're putting the army together, while you're putting the pieces together, while the woman is baking the cake, she's got to know, I'm baking the cake, I'm putting the pieces together, I'm putting it into the oven, and then Hashem takes over. It's not me. Everything's miracles. That it comes out a cake, that's a miracle. Yes, it's natural, but the nature is a miracle. And I've got to let go of that. I've done my piece, I've done the best I can, and at that point, and so you've got to know, although you're putting all this thought and effort into what you're doing, while you're investing all that thought and effort, you've got to know that's not what causes the success. It's all a nes, it's all from the Ribono Shel Olam, it's all min hashamayim. You've got to run an army and you've got to wage a war, and you've got to have your Iron Dome. But don't ever say, thank goodness for the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome had nothing to do with the success. Nothing. The Iron Dome was the kli. The success was Hashem's bracha. That's how it works. And that's very difficult to see when all that money goes into the Iron Dome and you watch it shooting out and you're impressed by it, to be able to look at all that and say, each time, Baruch Hashem, another situation of people being saved by Hashem's intervention using the Iron Dome. You plan a whole business deal and it comes off and you make $1 million out of the deal. You've got to be able to say, I put the pieces together, but the turning on the electricity, that wasn't me. It could not have worked also. You can never take for granted that things are going to work out. You put the pieces together and you mispell, you doubt. And that, in a sense, is the Gemara says, Afapi she'esh yoredet min hashamayim mitzvah lahavi min ha'edyot, even though on the altar, on the Mizbeach, fire used to come down from heaven, certainly in the first place, HaMikdash, still the Kohanim had to light human fire as well, because you needed the partnership of both. There's miracle in everything, and there's effort in everything. It's the putting together. This is about partnership. It's about, we create the kelim, Hashem turns on the current. Hashem makes it work. Klal Yisrael had a choice at this moment. The choice was, is Israel going to be like the Mizbeach HaChutz, like the outer Mizbeach, or is Eretz Yisrael going to be like the YHow? Are we going to live miraculously in Israel, or is it going to be about partnership, the same as it is outside of Israel? They had that choice. They could have gone back to the way the world would have been before Adam ate from the Eitz Hadat. How was that going to be? No partnership. Before the Eitz Hadat, it would be human beings would sit and develop themselves and keep Torah and mitzvahs, and Hashem would take care of everything else. Then Adam chose differently. Adam chose, I want partnership. I want to be involved. And that was part of the Adam and Chava, that was part of the eating of Eitz Hadat. I want to be part of the creative process of developing the world. Hashem says, okay, that's fine. Then that's the route you're choosing. And as Reb Katzkel said, it would have happened one way or another in any case. We've got another chance right now. You're going to Eretz Yisrael. Do you want to treat Eretz Yisrael as a miracle place? Or do you want to be involved in partnership? Do you want to be creating your side of it, putting the pieces together that Hashem can bless? And by asking for the spies, Bnei Yisrael are choosing the second route. They're saying, we want to do it naturally. We understand it's all min hashamayim and it's all by miracle, but we want to go the natural route. We want to have intelligence, we want to spy, we want to fight, we want to do everything normally, so that Eretz Yisrael is conquered in a natural-looking way, and that life continues the way, the life that we've always known since Adam. That was Adam's choice, and we are affirming Adam's choice for Eretz Yisrael. We were given the opportunity to isolate Eretz Yisrael into this miraculous bubble, where you wouldn't have to work. It would all be Birkas Hashem. And Bnei Yisrael opted for the other. Once they opted for that, Hashem says, Shlach lecha. Now I'm telling you to send in spies, because that's the way you've got to operate. You've chosen that. Now it's a mitzvah to do it. It's not a concession. Now that you've opted for that model for Eretz Yisrael, now it becomes a mitzvah to put in the effort and to exert that effort. And so these two schools of thought, the one says, it's just a token. Just do as little as you can do to pay your fine, and then Hashem will give bracha. And the other school of thought, Rabbeinu Bechai, you've got to do everything you can, everything within your capability, and then nice happens afterwards. They're actually not two views, they're one view. It depends on your choice. You can choose to go back to a pre-Odom Harishon kind of model. You can say, yes, okay, Bnei Yisrael chose that Eretz Yisrael is to be a place that works in partnership, where we've got to make the effort and Hashem blesses our effort. But you could choose to live the other way. Reb Zundel can say, for me, I'll pay the fine because that's universal, but it's just going to be a lottery ticket. That's all I'm doing, because I want to live by miracles. I want to live in Hashem's world where it's not totally by miracle. I've got to do something physical, but the bare minimum physical is all I want to do, because that's what I'm opting. We can make those choices every day, and there are individuals even today who make those choices and who say, I don't want to be involved in the work of working and business and effort. I want to put all of my effort into Torah and Avodah, everything. And just a little bit I'll do to make sure that I'm not relying on a miracle. That's my personal choice. But for most of us, that's not, because what does it depend on? How do you know which choice to make? What's important is, as the Chazon Ish explains, is your level of relaxation. Bitachon is measured by a level of relaxation. If you're worried about where the money is going to come from, you can't say, I've got bitachon. I'm not making an effort. Because Hashem will provide, but you're not sleeping at night. That doesn't work. You've got to be completely calm and relaxed about it. If you can just buy a lottery ticket or open a small little business on the side of the road and be completely relaxed, sleep at night and learn and do all the things you need to do without any worry about your parnasah, then you can make that choice. But if you do have worry, then you need to choose the other way and say, in that case, I need to make efforts. I've got to do everything I can naturally and rely on the fact that once I've put the pieces together, Hashem will bless it, will bless my efforts, and we'll have that particular outcome. So yes, there are two schools of thought about bitachon and ishtadlut. According to both schools of thought, it is a paradox, and managing that paradox is the key to living in two worlds at once. To be able to live in a physical world, acting as if everything that happens is in my hands, I need to accomplish it, and yet knowing that's not true. That opposite, that my actions are directed in one way and my beliefs are directed in a different way, is the challenge of bitachon and ishtadlut. If you just had to have bitachon, it would be easy. Don't do anything, just rely on God. If you didn't have to have bitachon at all, it would be easy. Go into business and do what everybody else does, work for your living, and that's fine. It's the two together that is so hard. That you've got to live in a way as if everything's dependent on you, and you've got to know nothing's dependent on you. That's what's really difficult. But when one gets that right, one is able to live in a masterful way in both worlds simultaneously. In the world that Hashem takes care of completely, and in the world that we have to operate in, and one's able to have ruchnius and gashmius linked together, one's able to have them and to live in a way where the two are connected and not disconnected and disassociated from one another. Tonight's shir is being sponsored by my son-in-law and his family in memory of his father, was my late mechutin, Reb Hirsch ben Velvel Duncan, passed away 8 years ago, and was an amazingly optimistic person. And what he was optimistic about was the unlimited potential and possibilities of life, of people, and of the stock market as well. He loved that. He was very proud of being Jewish. He wasn't raised to be a Shomer Mitzvahs. He kept what he knew about, but took great pride in the fact that his son became frum and Shomer Mitzvahs. And that's always the important thing, that after 120 years, there are people who come upstairs to Shamayim and they say to Hashem, I didn't have the opportunity. I didn't keep anything. I didn't live in a time or in a place where there was access to the kind of knowledge that I needed. And Hashem will surely accept that as a valid reason and be merciful for that. But then the big thing is, and how did you relate to people who were religious? And particularly your own children. When your own children became observant, how did you respond to that? Hirsch Duncan was incredibly proud of Jared. We're all proud of Jared and the beautiful family that he and my daughter Olivia are raising. And Jared has the same qualities that his father had in being able to sit next to a stranger, no matter how senior or junior, and within minutes know their whole life story. I don't know if the Mossad has found him yet, but if they're looking for anybody, here's the guy. And the idea of sponsorship, as we've mentioned before, particularly now that we're meeting physically as well, and Yetz Hashem, the group will grow, both the online group and the physical group, because we're just having to get used to this hybrid idea. I think that's where the future is, to be able to do both. The idea of sponsorship is the fact that as we're learning, every word that we're learning together, and everybody who's participating, both here and online, the person in whose memory the sponsorship is taking place, every word of Torah goes to their credit and gives them pleasure and raises them in Shamayim. So the idea of sponsoring group learning, it's wonderful to sponsor an individual who's learning as well, but the idea of sponsoring group learning, it's something very special, and we're grateful to Jared and to everybody else who has sponsored in the past. Kosher Travelers still sponsors on the overall series, and we're very grateful to David and Hannah and for their sponsorship. And there are many other people who have shown an interest, and as the weeks go by, Yetz Hashem, there'll be an opportunity not only for you to sponsor, but also for us to introduce you to the people, as I have introduced you to my son-in-law, who's on the shir, as he almost always is, unless something from a work perspective gets in his way.